Queer cinema has existed almost as long as cinema itself. The art form has proven an ideal forum for the LGBTQIA+ community to tell its stories and to expose wider audiences to the realities of being queer throughout history. There have been literally hundreds of queer films made over the decades, some obscure, some achieving mainstream success. Now, the great pop culture debate wants to determine, what is the best queer film of all time? Do you know what happens when you get cum in your eye, Gabriel? I do. I'm your host, Eric Resniak. Please welcome my panel for this episode, who will also deliver some sick burns. He's been stumbling around the pub circuit with lay girls for the last 200 years. It's Johnny Minogue.
Shit. All I can see is female impersonators.
That was a really good accent, by the way. And also, may I interest you in some of these Whoa Man cosmetic products?
Don't send any money.
Carissa Kloss, is it raining outside? You look cold.
No, Eric, I'm just shivering in anticipation for this episode.
Well, why don't we go take in an old Steve Reeves movie? And finally, he pierced the toast. Please welcome back Kevin Dillon.
Sweetie, you're wasting your gum.
Kevin, why are there all these young men playing leapfrog on my plate?
Ooh, I have some little girls over there on my bowl. Don't you have some girls? That looks like a girl right there.
So, before we get to the debate, how does this work? We made a poll of every significant LGBTQ-themed movie we could think of. We were broad in our interpretation. We included films about LGBT subject matter, films featuring LGBT main characters, documentaries, foreign films, etc. Our listeners picked their favorites. We tallied the votes, ranked the picks by popularity, and added them to a bracket. Now we argue about it and insult each other, all for your amusement. Want to play along at home? You can. Head to greatpopculturedebate.com and go to the polls and brackets section. There you'll find the downloadable listener brackets for this and every episode of our little show. Do your picks match up with ours? Do you think we left our wigs in a box? Let us know by dropping a comment on this episode at our website or by yelling at us on Twitter, Instagram, or Mastodon. Now, if you're curious about how we went from the top 32 down to the Sweet 16, become a Patreon supporter of our podcast. Our patrons at the $5 level or higher get exclusive access to the warm-up/part ones for each episode, in which we work our way through all of round one. It's like a whole bonus episode for each topic, and it includes arguments you will not hear anywhere else. And that's just one of our great Patreon perks, so please consider subscribing today. With that out of the way, let's go, quote, fishing with our totally straight buddy, wink, as we move on to these debates. First up, it's another unanimous decision for ultimate number one seed Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which can leave its wig on the shelf for yet another round as it dispatched 5 seed Heavenly Creatures, but Carissa wanted to speak on Creatures before we put it out to pasture. Carissa?
Yeah, I talked about this a bit in our warm-up episode, and Heavenly Creatures, if you have not seen it, please go see it. It's a 1994 film about girls. It's a true story of a true crime. So, like, that's got to get most of our audience right there. It is introducing Kate Winslet and Melanie Lynskey. And it is about, girls in an all-girl school who have a very intense friendship. Is it sexual? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And also they murder one of their mothers, who is trying to keep them apart. So definitely worth your time. Very early Peter Jackson also, so worth it on a lot of levels, and beautifully acted and directed and a little bit campy and very fun.
It is a difficult film to find. We will say that when we were doing our research for this episode, we discovered that it's not really available on any streaming service, and you can't even rent it on Amazon, right?
Yeah. We found it on, basically the Wayback Machine of the internet.
Yes, that is how we access that. So if you need some help on it, let us know. We can try to hook you up. Next up, it's another unanimous decision, this time for 3 seed Milk versus 2 seed Love, Simon. But before it went out, Kevin did want to say something about Love, Simon, which is kind of an important Gen Z queer film, correct?
Yeah, I would say it was a really popular young adult book that was adapted into this film that represented kind of an interesting examination of modern coming out. I think the thing about coming out stories that often sometimes get derided by folks online is like, well, haven't we seen this story, or haven't we seen this story of a young white man coming out time and time again? And I don't think that means we shouldn't tell that story, but I think what I like about Love, Simon the most is that it actually gives voice to, other films to continue, like something like a Heartstopper or Love, Victor, which is another television version of this story that actually centers on the intersections of what it means to be a Latinx or Hispanic man and queer. And I think it gives and builds a new generation's coming out story. And so I think, I hear folks when they say, haven't we seen this or whatnot? And maybe even as a 38-year-old man, it's not necessarily a story I want to watch per se, but that story still needs to exist for folks who are coming out as queer today. And so glad it made the bracket in a way to really share and echo this voice of coming out, or to help support those voices around coming out.
Yeah, and I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit on this episode, so warning on that. But I think that's a really important point that we have to talk about is sometimes it's not about you, the person who's listening to this. Sometimes this is about the next generation. And you may think to yourself, well, I've already seen coming out movies since the 90s. Cool. A 17-year-old living in Peoria has not, and is probably not going to have easy access to the same 90s coming out films that you watched, because a lot of them are not easily found now. And also the reality that we had in the 90s is completely different than the reality that they have now. And that's a great thing, for the most part. But this idea, like, well, it's all been done. All of it's been done, baby cakes. Like, snap out of it. Like, just allow people to have their stories. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. But that doesn't mean that you should be yucking anybody else's yum. And I realize the irony of me saying that on a podcast that is about debates. So yes, thank you. Next, an actual debate. It's 1 seed Brokeback Mountain versus 4 seed Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Currently, the panel is evenly split, and this is going to get ugly. I'm going to board the bus
nice,
for Priscilla.
I promise.
I will be nice too. We're coming from a place of love. Kevin is going to go fishing for votes for Brokeback Mountain. Kevin, why don't you go first?
Yeah, Brokeback Mountain, 2005 film from the director Ang Lee, starring Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal, which centers on 2 men who are sheep herders in the mountains, based on a short story by Annie Proulx, and I think, and I get the critiques on this film and around it being around 2 straight actors kind of exploring a queer relationship. But what I think this film does really well is examines the intersection of masculinity and sexuality quite perfectly. I think why this film stands out is because it is the pinnacle around toxic masculinity and taking a stereotype of the quote unquote Western or cowboy genre, and making it something very fascinating and interesting in a very different way that was present in the 50s, 60s films that weren't exactly on the surface, like a Red River. And I think ultimately, this was a film that was heavily predicted to win Best Picture the year it came out. And the reason it didn't was because of homophobia. You had Oscar voters who openly said, I will not vote for the gay cowboy movie. And I think this represents something so interesting and fascinating around a mainstream queer film that was nominated for Best Picture, was meant to win, had many Oscars, and it did win Best Director, Best Score, Best Adapted Screenplay, but it represented a kind of shift in the existence of more queer cinema at that time. It really was at the fringe of that. And, I'm glad it existed, and I'm glad it exists. And it's a sad and beautiful story around queerness and masculinity.
You did a great job, Kevin. And if you listen to the Patreon episode, things got a little hotsy-totsy between myself and Kevin on this subject.
We love each other, I promise.
I can't quit you, Kevin.
I wish I knew how to.
Oh, God.
I'd hug your flannel shirt with the coat if I could right now.
I don't own flannel. No, but what I was going to say is that one of my points was I was giving credence more to films that had actual queer people behind the camera on the screen than just straight people making them. In this particular matchup, that's moot because everybody involved is a straight person. So that goes with it, number one. Number two, I will say everything you just said about Brokeback Mountain is true. And the fact that it did make the impact that it did in this industry is because of the stars and the talent that was attached to it.
Yep.
If they had used gay directors and openly gay actors
who was out at that time,
right, I don't think it would have made the seismic shift, as you mentioned, that it did. So I have tremendous respect for this film, and I hope I did not insinuate otherwise.
No.
But I'm here to talk about Priscilla, which I adore, and I know Johnny is right here with me. We are painting this bus a hideous shade of, would we call it fuchsia? Is that what we're calling it?
It's lavender.
Lavender. So Priscilla, it's a 90s movie. It is about 3 drag performers who are crossing the Australian outback to go on a walkabout. They each have their own reasons for going on the journey. One of them is being dishonest about theirs, but that's all part of the plot. It is, I assume, I don't actually know this to be true, the inspiration for To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, the kind of American version of it that came out a few years later, starring Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo, which did not make our bracket, by the way. That might surprise people. But Priscilla came first, and I adore it. It is a thoroughly Australian film, meaning that it is campy, it is in your face. It was one of my first real introductions to drag on the big screen. The soundtrack is amazing. It's got great ABBA numbers. It's got Finally by CeCe Peniston. The costume design in this movie, I believe, won an Oscar. Am I correct?
It did.
Spectacular. They're the images of the bright lavender bus with the giant silver shoe and the queens on top with the flowing garments in the wind. It's literally iconic. It also, one of the things that I love about it and why I'm pushing it forward, take a drink, why I'm pushing it forward here is that it is a queer film that shows the downside of gay life. And there's a hate crime in this film. There's an actual gay bashing that happens. You see the sorrow and at the time, the kind of expectation that gay people would not be able to have fulfilling romantic partnerships that lasted for their lifetimes. It spoke to a lot of gay themes, even if none of the people on the screen, which by the way, it's an all-star cast. It's Terrence Stamp, it's Guy Pearce, it is Hugo Weaving. Yes. And they're all great. They're all great in this movie. But to me, it was incredibly compelling. And I love the dance number. So that's what I'm saying about Priscilla. 2 very different films. Johnny, do you have anything else to say about Priscilla? Because I think right now, unless there's some seismic shift, we're saying that term a lot this episode.
I like it.
It's going out, right?
All right, I'm gonna work on Carissa. I'm gonna try. Here's the thing. So first of all, you want to talk about a movie that was before its time, a movie that shamed somebody for dead naming somebody. That never happened. That was in 1994. You want to talk about some iconic things that are in this movie? Well, the director, and it was written by the gay man who was also the doorman at the casino. He did that. Bill Hunter, who played Bob, also at the same time was filming Muriel's Wedding. He would have to go back and forth. So that was some very interesting dynamic there, that he had to shave his beard, then not shave, then grow it out, shave his beard, because he was doing both movies at the same time, which were ABBA related. But it wasn't always going to be ABBA related, because initially a lot of those songs were supposed to be Kylie Minogue songs. Yes. They even had something with Stock Aitken Waterson, who wrote all of Kylie's early numbers, but it was because Polygram was the movie house that was doing it. They said, no, you can't do the Kylie numbers. You have to do from our catalog of music. So it could have been a very different, very much more Australian movie if they had the Kylie songs rather than the ABBA songs. Huh. So I honestly, this is one of my favorite movies of all time, not queer movies, favorite movies of all time. I will watch it again and again, and it's it for me. There's no other.
I hear you, Carissa. Where are you on this?
I feel like I'm in the middle. I hadn't seen Priscilla until I watched it for this bracket, and just the hair in this film is amazing. And there's like a kid's storyline, and it's kind of a buddy film. And there's also one of the, their drag performers. 2 of them are drag queens. One is a trans woman, and they call it cabaret, right? That they do. And it is campy AF. Mm-hmm. I love it. I also Oh Jack, I swear, is something that I have said so many times in my life. Brokeback was a cultural moment that I remember, and Priscilla probably was, but I don't remember it because I was too young or not part of the. I don't know. So in this, I'm going to revert to the seeding of our voters and move forward with Brokeback.
This is an audio medium, so you can't see it, but Johnny is literally pouring one out right now for Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. That is actually what's happening.
And it's wonderful. And if you haven't seen it, please see it. It's lovely.
I
think for me, I hadn't seen it until we did this either, and I had specifically said to Eric I hadn't seen it. And I think having seen To Wong Foo first, I'm more connected to To Wong Foo than I am this film. And so, yeah.
Yeah, Johnny also, in addition to pouring one out for Priscilla, unfurled his sachet away fan. So this is the best queer film episode that could possibly exist. Johnny, you and I are going to have to board a bus and fish out abattoirs to console ourselves over this.
It's going to be hard.
I mean, the hair, it almost tipped me because the hair is incredible.
Yeah. I was like, it took $7 to make the sandal dress that she made, and I got an Academy Award $7.
Amazing.
Icons. Well, please go and see it. Do a double feature with that and To Wong Foo. Frankly, that's a great Friday night.
Good idea.
But we will be advancing Brokeback Mountain. Next, 3-seed Call Me By Your Name is up against 2-seed The Birdcage, two very different films. I will talk about Call Me By Your Name. If, by the way, you were like, Eric, where's their sassy commentary? So many things changed in round 1 for this one. It was impossible to pre-plan, so just go with it. Kevin's going to talk about, Carissa's going to talk about The Birdcage. Carissa, do you want to go first for Birdcage and then I'll talk about Call Me By Your Name?
Sure, but mostly what I have to say about The Birdcage is Fosse, Martha Graham. I mean, like, there's so much of this film that is kind of iconic. Take a Drink. It's a wonderful performance by Robin Williams, and it's very fun. Everybody knows the story. It's a gay couple who's trying to play straight for the son's fiance's senator, some kind of like conservative politician family. And, spoiler, they show up there, people know that they're there and they have to leave undercover, and they do so by going into drag. Like, would this storyline be accepted now? Like, would there not be protests outside the theater for this? Right. Like, we are now learning all of these conservatives have done drag in their previous lives, but they're still like trying to outlaw it for everybody now. Like, yep. So part of this is just like, you should see it for this, and also recognize that we are taking multiple steps backward right now. But it's also very fun. Like, Robin Williams and Nathan Lane are very fun and very cute. There's a lot here that's hilarious. Also, Hank Azaria as
Agador Spartacus.
Yeah, what is
he?
He's the housekeeper / cook /
houseboy.
He does all the things around the home, and even just like the dishes, which were with the leapfrogging men. There's a lot of sight gags. There's a kind of a identity confusion because there is a woman who is coming to play the wife, but the wife is already there, but she's in drag. There's so much there. It's very fun. It's very sweet, and it's also kind of horrifying to watch now and wonder how it would be perceived by a lot of the audience that is very vocal these days.
Yeah. One slight correction I will make is we're not necessarily making the steps back. They're trying to push us back, and we are going to push back even harder. So I think one thing to take away from this
more
episode
bird cages
is, yes, there's more of us than there are of them, and we are not going anywhere, and our stories will not be silenced. So that being said, I'm here to talk about Call Me By Your Name, which I had not watched prior to doing my research for this episode. This is a fairly recent film on this list. I'm going to say within the last 5 years. It's Timothée Chalamet, and it is the actual Cannibal Army Hammer. That was a joke if his lawyers are listening. But also look that up. So it is a film that is it's set in the 80s. It is about a young, I would guess he's 15, 16?
17. He's 17.
17. Thank you. That's an important distinction.
He's 17.
17-year-old whose father, their family has a beautiful estate in Italy and is a professor, and they have students come and live with him for the summer. And this summer student happens to be a strapping young 20-something 24 something. Thank you very much, Kevin, who is, all American kind of Brooks Brothers bohunk type action, right? And so the two of them don't like each other at first, and then kind of out of nowhere suddenly are all over each other. That's my take on it. There are elements of this story that frankly did not work for me, if I'm being completely frank, but let's talk about the stuff that's good. Number one, beautiful film. Gorgeous film. Beautiful shots. The setting is luscious. I did love the wistful nature of it. The exploration of teen sexual awakening and frustration felt very real. Timothy Chalamet is amazing in this film. He's good. He's
perfect.
The real deal. He will, I think, be one of the landmark actors of this generation. And the way that he's so evocative in his body language and his intensity really spoke to me. Hammer, I could either do with or without, but the fact that the film itself almost feels like a memory of this man as an adult thinking back to this summer of exploration, that was lovely, and I think really is going to resonate with a lot of older gays. There are elements of it that don't work as well. I did not love it overall as a film, but it does have some iconic scenes, including, was the peach emoji a thing before this film? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
It meant something different.
It sure
I think.
was.
Yeah, it meant something different.
It was for bottoms in Atlanta. That's what it was.
There you go. And this is peaches and cream.
God. You went there.
I did.
Shake your groove thing.
Exactly. Thank you very. That's Peaches and Herb. But Johnny, where are you on this one?
Oh, I am not voting for Under the Tuscan Sun. SON. I am. That is not for me. No. It's like we're going with Agador Spartacus, and it's like a stew.
Yes,
it's a stew.
It's a stew. It's like
I put some shrimps in it.
Kevin, you are where?
I'm at Birdcage. I want to add, because I probably maybe like Call Me by Your Name the most of our panel, and so I just want to highlight. I think what it connects to is like that ultimate crush that exists in your mind, and that experience that elongates what we all feel when we ultimately fall in love, and how we romanticize it when yet it's also incredibly toxic for us in many ways. And I think it really emanates that. And I think Luca Guadagnino, who directed the film, who is a gay man, and James Ivory, who wrote the screenplay, who is also gay, really created this beautiful, like almost, Eric, the way you put it, around like a fever dream, a memory of what that was and existed. And that's why it's, I think, a very good film, but absolutely the Birdcage.
We call it a crush for a reason, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
the ending is so beautiful and so crushing, and just
with Sufjan,
and the snow falling, and it's beautiful and lovely. And like, I fucking hate Armie Hammer. I think
Absolutely.
he's trash, and I still move this forward in previous rounds because I do think it's beautiful.
I will say the gayest thing about it is that Timothée Chalamet used to date Madonna's daughter.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. All right, so we are going to advance the Birdcage into round 3. Next up, it's, I believe, a unanimous decision for 1-seed Rocky Horror Picture Show over 5-seed Fire Island. But Kevin does want to take the ferry and talk about the ferries of Fire Island. So, Kevin, why don't you go?
So, humble brag, I was on the ferry with the fairies from the film Fire Island when I went to Fire Island last summer. And, like, I had that experience after watching the film maybe, like, a week before. And I was like, this is melting my brain. And they were all really very nice and lovely. And we were all hanging out because it's a small ferry to get to Fire Island. And I think what I love about Fire Island is it's obviously Joel Kim Booster is a stand-up comic who had the opportunity to write this. It's based on Pride and Prejudice. I'm a fucking sucker for Pride and Prejudice. I love Jane Austen. I love that book so much. And to build it out as a like queer romance is perfect. And the cast is amazing. Bowen Yang, Matt Rogers, Joel Kim Booster, and
Margaret
really for
Cho.
me was Yes, Margaret Cho.
Peg Cho, absolutely.
And she's so good as the like mother surrogate. And it's very funny. It's very sweet. It's very romantic. And yet there's people vomiting from like party drugs and like group sex and all of that. And it's a mostly POC cast. And you really get to see what it feels like in a modern sense. Yet the romance was maybe the same back in that day, but like, how do we bring that to like a queer POC framework in this film? And it's a tale as old as time. And I think that's why it's connecting to a lot of folks. And it's on Hulu and it's great.
Yeah, I love it, and I absolutely would have advanced it to the next round if it wasn't up against the juggernaut that is Rocky Horror.
Yep.
Eric's soapbox moment number 2 on this episode is that when it came out, there was a lot of pushback from the gay community, which said that it was not inclusive enough because it only really showed things from the aspect of the Asian American community. And I was like, that is amazing in and of itself. Frankly, that's something that we should be celebrating, not criticizing. Right. But not every film can be everything to every person. And instead of sitting there and nitpicking things for not being all, it was too sizist. I don't want to see all of these ripped people talking about how fat they are. Like, I was just like, but can we just appreciate what it's doing instead of criticizing for things that it wasn't setting out to do? Can we please get to that place? Because we cannibalize ourselves as a community. Sorry, Armie Hammer, but like we do. And I think we need to be better at supporting.
We're going to take a drink for that one in this podcast.
Seriously. But we need to get better at supporting our own stories, even if they're not exactly the stories that you wanted to tell. Somebody else had the balls to go out and tell them and support that.
Yeah.
Because again, we are under assault right now, and we need to be raising each other up and not stuffing each other back because we're not doing everything we want each other to do. Anybody have anything else to say about Fire Island before we move along? Johnny, Carissa?
Just say Margaret Cho was underused in that movie. They could have done so much more with it. That's all I have to say.
I love the diversity of the cast. I thought it was really fun and really sweet. And I loved it. I would watch more films like this. More, please.
Yes.
Agreed. Next up, I believe it's a split decision, and this is a tough one. It's 3-seed Moonlight versus 2-seed Cabaret. These are both Oscar-winning films. And so I'm going to have Johnny talk about Cabaret first, and then Kevin's going to bring it up for Moonlight. Johnny, take us to the Cabaret.
What's good at sitting all alone in your room? Obviously. So
depends on what's on my iPad.
Come see the music play means a completely different thing.
Completely
different thing. In any event. So if you don't know, I'm talking about the song from Cabaret. So Cabaret is 1972. It was the movie adaptation of the 1965 musical, which ended up being a version of the 1939 book by Christopher Isherwood, which is called Goodbye to Berlin. So what it is it's 1931's Berlin, and there is a new man in town. His name is Brian Roberts, played by Michael York. You probably remember him from the Austin Powers world. He played Q. He was the Q character. Anyway, so he's moving into his new flats in Berlin in Weimar Republic, and he meets Sally Bowles, played by Eliza, and they're living this bohemian lifestyle. And it is Sally Bowles works at the Kit Kat Club. So the Kit Kat Club is this cabaret in 1931's Berlin. It is crazy. It is sexual. It is a lot of fun. It's a lot of 1920s jazz music. Joel Grey plays the MC in the stage show. The MC is kind of the main character and the narrator. He is part of this moving everything along, and there's a beautiful soundtrack that is done by John Kander and Fred Ebb. And honestly, it is what we're talking about is, when it comes to the queerness of it, beyond the Kit Kat Club will also be between the relationship between Sally and Brian, which is a sexual one, but then also the Baron, who has had kind of seduce both of them in a way that is delicious, and it's a little understated, but that's kind of how you had to live your queer life in Weimar Republic, 1930s Germany. You got to say Liza. It's Liza. There's not a lot of the music that is in the musical that's on stage. However, there still is the beauty of the city of Berlin, the countryside, and the excitement that is happening at that period of time. And a little bit of, it gets dark at the end. It's not.
It's a very dark ending.
It's a very dark movie.
Yeah, I will say this. In addition to it, like that's what you had to do to get by in Weimar, Germany. To have a film in 1970s America, they also couldn't have it be super explicit what was going on with the gay stuff, right? It's really more intimated than it is explicit in this film, but it's still like it's pretty clear what's going on.
Right. It's like screw Maximilian. I do. So do I. That's it.
Exactly. Kevin, talk to me about Moonlight.
Yeah, we talked about Moonlight in round one quite a bit. So what I want to do is I'll just kind of briefly say Moonlight obviously is the 2018 Best Picture winner from Barry Jenkins. And I missed the other co-writer, Terrell Alvin McCraney, who is the queer writer. And this film is based on his play. And so what I will say, and I will take this through the kind of three acts as to why I think this does kind of move forward for me in this round, is because this is really the pinnacle of the evolution of Black queer media in general. So at this point, you benchmark things or a movement or a progression. Now, it's not a great progression because we still haven't had enough, but it represents that pinpoint, and you get to see the evolution of Black queer masculinity at each stage of a young man's life. You see a mother recognize that there is a femininity in her Black gay son that is often linked to queerness in the Black community. And he has a sequence in that first part with Mahershala Ali where he asks him, and trigger alert, if you don't like this word, I'm sorry, what is a faggot? And he is clearly called a faggot at school. And in this moment, connecting with that naming of who you are as your identity, you get an introspective exploration of Black queerness throughout the rest of this that he discovers under the moonlight in part 2 when he has a sexual encounter with his best friend. You don't see it on screen, which I think is some people's problem. You don't always need to see sex for it to exist. And then in part 3, you see Chiron Little, who has left prison, become the man that he is, and meets his friend from part 2. And you see that end result of their interaction and their relationship and their exploration of their own BIPOC, because they're both men of color, queer masculinity. And so I think for me, Moonlight represents a peak shift in that. And you don't have Pose without that film.
It's a good point. Carissa, where are you on this one?
I'm with Cabaret. I love Moonlight as a film. I just struggle with it as a queer film because I also feel like it speaks more to Black masculinity and what it means to be a man in that community. And also kind of there's a whole subculture or a subplot line of the drug involvement, like with his mom and also with the father figure in the early parts, and then who Sharon grows up to be. And I feel like the queerness is part of the storyline, but not explicitly the storyline. And I'm also honestly a little bit salty that it took out Portrait of a Lady on Fire in the first round, which I feel like is explicitly queer from a female perspective. And so in this case, I'm going to go with Liza and Cabaret.
Well, we do love a spite vote. I'm sticking with Moonlight here, and my counter to the argument is that I feel that the queerness of Moonlight is frankly more explicit than the queerness of Cabaret. Cabaret is, to me, yes, the homosexuality aspect of it, bisexuality aspect of it is there, but it's less about specifically that as much as it is like the world closing in around on these people and in the face of a fascist government, right? So it's not just the fact I believe there are other people who also start to go missing and have their lives interrupted, not because they're queer, but because there's some other, right? And so is Cabaret gay? Sure. I think Moonlight is even more explicitly gay than Cabaret is, in my opinion. And we're talking about queer cinema. So that being said, Carissa and Johnny, you're sticking with Cabaret here?
Yeah, but I'm fine if Moonlight goes forward.
No, Cabaret's a higher seed.
All your arguments were completely valid, 100%. So I think
I do think it is a shame we're getting rid of this film, but Cabaret is a higher seed. It's odd to me. I don't think of Cabaret as a queer film at all, and I don't know that many would. But here we are.
Well, can we at least get one more Liza in there? Liza!
Well, no,
it's moving forward.
Yeah.
What?
Yes, it's a 2 seed.
That's why I'm saying I think we are doing a disservice to Moonlight.
Oh, interesting. You know, honestly, I'm going to switch my vote then, because I want...
Carissa, are you gagged? Are you gooped?
I mean...
Listen, Mistress Isabel Brooks it, Johnny. We love it.
I look forward to taking it out in the next round.
All right, so
that's fine. No, because I honestly, it's like I love Cabaret. I performed in Cabaret in boarding school when I was in boarding school. I was in boarding school, surprisingly, but I would prefer to have Moonlight go forward, even though I just argued against it. I don't think it wasn't arguing against Moonlight. I was just arguing for Cabaret. Cabaret. Let's move around. So get that Liza in there, and then we're moving along.
Just like the Oscars, it's in a last-minute twist. Moonlight is advancing.
I love y'all so much. Y'all are funny.
I love being the Faye Dunaway of this podcast right now.
All right. So next, it's 1 seed, but I'm a cheerleader versus 4 seed, Boys Don't Cry. This is terrible. This is a terrible matchup. I think both of these films deserve to continue. They're incredibly different, but both speak to the lesbian experience. I'm going to talk about Boys Don't Cry. Carissa's going to talk about Cheerleader. Here's my thing on Boys Don't Cry. We talked a little bit about this in round 1, specifically when it was Boys Don't Cry versus Philadelphia. And I was talking about how if you are under the age of 30, I don't think you can fully grasp how traumatic the 90s were for gay people in America. I mean, traumatic everywhere, but I can only speak to the existence of a gay teen in America. And Boys Don't Cry and Philadelphia are kind of 2 exemplaries of that. Boys Don't Cry speaks to what was going on with actual gay bashings and death that were happening in this country and still happen today much more frequently to trans people and people of color in the queer community in this world. But I'm a Cheerleader was speaking to the conversion therapy movement, right? They take these in very different directions, but I'm a Cheerleader takes it into a comedy. Boys Don't Cry is a very grippingly realistic take on the murder of Brandon Tina, who was born as Tina Brandon, a trans man who was living in Nebraska, who did not have the funds for gender-affirming surgeries, and the real life that person led, and then was then taken away from them due to transphobia and homophobia and a mess of other issues. It's a gripping film. It won, I believe it was the first Oscar. Am I right for Hilary Swank? Her first Best Actress Oscar.
Yes.
As Brandon Tina, a terrific performance, but also great performances by Chloe Sevigny. Great performances by, is it Peter Sarsgaard who plays?
Yes. Peter.
Just unhinged in this film, terrifying.
And don't forget Becky the First.
Yes,
Becky
that's right. Good call,
in
Johnny.
this movie. Yeah, but like the thing about Sarsgaard's energy, watching it now, I was just like, this is still very much the wild, unfulfilled, white, straight male kind of enmity that permeates our culture. It's a difficult film to watch in multiple ways, but it's an important film to watch. And I'm glad that we're talking about it. And I think both of these are great films. Chris, I'm going to let you take it for Cheerleader.
There's a line in Boys Don't Cry where Peter Sarsgaard's character says, when he's accused of raping Brandon Tina, says, "Why would I rape him? I have so-and-so to do that," like his girlfriend's name. But I'm a Cheerleader is Natasha Lyonne as a cheerleader who's like, well, everybody looks at girls' bodies and thinks of them and all the things. And someone's like, maybe not in the same way that you do. And she's like, wait, what? And is sent to conversion therapy. This film is camp AF. RuPaul is playing super butch and masculine. All of the costumes are either like blue or pink. The girls all wear the same color, if not the same outfit. It also has Melanie Lynskey in it from Heavenly Creatures. And it's a queer love story in a conversion therapy place where it becomes increasingly absurd. Like, what are they trying to do to these people? Let them be themselves. Also, the director's son is very clearly gay. And like RuPaul's character says, like, I used to be a homo, when it's like very clear that he still is. And honestly, I'm elevating it in this matchup because as much as I think Boys Don't Cry is an excellent and worthy and important film, I think we need to talk about queer joy as opposed to queer pain. And that's where But I'm a Cheerleader is fun. It is camp. It is really fun to look at. All the parents are always wearing the drabbest colors when they're not in the conversion place, like the teens also are. And there's like this wonderful gay couple that is running a like altar conversion. We will save you. And also Julie Delpy is a lipstick lesbian at the gay club that they go to, which is like, if you grew up on Before Sunrise, like I did, like seeing her in this role is a really wonderful place to be. So queer joy.
I love the idea that we have to focus on queer joy as well, right? There is a time and a place for talking about the pain, right? But
and rewatching, which would you rather rewatch? Like,
for sure.
We know which one is maybe more important in the grand scheme, but where do you want to spend time?
No question. I'll watch Cheerleader now, today, tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Johnny, where are you on this one?
I'd like to, don't tell mom the cheerleader is a lesbian.
All right.
And then, by the way, Bull from Night Court is also in this movie.
Yes, he's one of the
Yes. Don't forget him.
Yeah.
He is. Kevin, where are you on this?
I'm also with But I'm a Cheerleader as well.
All right. And I think that's fine. I did want to speak on Boys Don't Cry because I do think it's important. And if you are under the age of 30, I'm not going to tell you like, ooh, you should go and sign up and watch all these depressing films. But I do think it's important to understand where we came from, because I'm going to keep ringing this bell. We are not that far down the road and we could very easily get pushed back. So know that, don't take anything for granted. We had to fight to get where we are, and we're going to have to fight even harder to stay here and progress. Next up, so we're going to advance, But I'm a Cheerleader. Next up, it is another unanimous decision, this time for 2-seed Paris is Burning, which will be taking out the neo-lesbian, I was going to say neo-lesbian, which actually it is because it's the directors from The Matrix. But I did want to have Carissa talk a little bit about Bound and its kind of neo-noir charms.
Yeah, I saw this forever ago and then revisited it a couple of times in the past few years. And I love a heist movie, and it kind of is a heist movie. It's about the girlfriend of a gangster who meets Gina Gershon in a tank top and jeans doing construction in the apartment next door, and they have a lesbian love affair, and they scheme to get the girlfriend, who's Jennifer Tilly, away from the gangster while also stealing $2 million from him and implicating him with his gangster buddies as like the guy who does the stealing. And it's spicy. It's fun. As far as like a campy heist film, it's right there. There's tension in the movie. You're afraid. There's a couple of scenes that are really, the characters are a little bit in peril, and you're like, how are they going to get out of this? And there's a creative solution to all of the crimes. And yeah, it's the Wachowskis, pre-Matrix, pre-transformation, but really exploring the queer storylines to start. And also, did I mention Gina Gershon in a tank top and jeans doing construction? It's like full on Shane from the L Word, but like 20 years earlier. Like
she was doing a lot of hot stuff. It was like Showgirls, Bound. She was totally in there for the lesbians at that time.
Yeah, it's very much a male gaze. Oh my God.
Please, someone do it. Try it.
I can't.
Come on, somebody's got it in them.
It's gonna come out as Jennifer Coolidge. I can't do it.
I know.
Yeah.
Mine's going to come out as Carol Channing. It's not going to work either.
It's very breathy like this.
Yeah.
And she gets like, she's best friends with Sutton from Real Housewives of Beverly
She
Hills
is.
too. It's a little more, it's a little more in the nose. Anyways, I had to.
We love these lesbian icons, and thank you, Carissa, for speaking on them.
Yay,
It's a little male gazy,
Yep.
as opposed to some of the other lesbian films that we have talked about, which are a little bit more from the female perspective. This very much feels feels a little more performative, or like, welcomed by the males versus like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is a bit more.
But technically, they do identify as women. But that's not necessarily where the camera's coming from, right?
Sure.
Sure.
It doesn't take on the identity of the director all the time.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yes.
And it was absolutely
I think that's a dicey road to walk down.
It was titillating, absolutely, for a male audience.
Wild Things-ish in that way.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's like you're confusing me again. If you watch it on the if you listen to this on the Patreon, you know what I'm talking about.
He confused Wild Things and Heavenly Creatures, and to that I have to say, get away from me, you skanky bitch. So with that being said, we are moving forward. Paris is Burning. That is the end of round 2. We're going to take a quick break and try to fish an abbotsford out of the toilet. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hey listeners, it's Bob from the Great Pop Culture Debate. We hope you're enjoying this episode and that you're yelling back at your speakers telling us how wrong we are. Did you know that there's a much better way to tell us how you feel? Come kiki with our panelists on Discord. Our patrons at the $10 level get access to our exclusive Discord server where you can share your thoughts about our decisions or just gab with our group about everything pop culture. It's like participating in your own episode of RuPaul's Drag Race Untucked. We have something for everyone to talk about, including reality TV, comics, news, nostalgia, and so much more. So if you love spirited debate and fabulous people, become a Patreon supporter today and join in on the conversation.
And we are back for round 3 of our best queer film debate. Before we get to the Elite 8, I want our panelists to share their social media so you can see just how gay they are. Johnny, why don't you tell me about your socials? Also tell me about what other projects you're doing. And also give us, when did you come out? I think that's important for people to know.
Absolutely. So I am Johnny Minogue, Jonny, one word, Minogue, just like Kylie and Danny, on pretty much everything. And for people who listen to this, I am no longer the fake Lauren Boebert at Truth Social. I got rid of her. She's been canceled. Got rid of it. So, so every single week, Tuesday night, if you live in Boston, I am at Club Cafe hosting Stump Trivia, 8 o'clock. Come, it's a lot of fun. Clubcafe.com, you can reserve your table. And I'm also part of the Gay Men's Chorus along with producer Curtis. And when this comes out, we'll have our spring show, Whitney and Friends. You need to come and you need to get your tickets now. Also, when I came out on Rosh Hashanah in 1995. I lived in West Hartford, Connecticut. You get the day off. And because we had so many Jewish people in our town, so we got the day off, just like Good Friday off in a lot of towns. And so I celebrate my coming out on Rosh Hashanah. It is almost 30 years this year. And when I turned 13, I celebrate my gay bat mitzvah.
Well, L'chaim, I love that for you. Carissa, what is your socials? What else are you working on? And when did you come out?
So you can find me mostly on Instagram at Carissa Kloss, where I talk about my sewing and some of the matching separates that I'm constantly working on. You can also, if you want to argue with me, join the Patreon and find me on our Discord. I'm very active there, usually talking about reality TV. As far as coming out, I identify as bisexual, and it has been an emerging thing, but I spent 4 years skating as a roller derby girl, and that was definitely an awakening of, or a reminder of things that I felt in my youth. So it's an emerging thing, but here we are.
We are so glad to have you on our rainbow. Let me just say that.
I'm happy to be here, and every time I'm recognized, it's incredibly validating. So thank you.
Of course. Kevin, your socials, your other projects, and when did you come out?
Well, on the other hand, Carissa, I'm not often recognized because my OnlyFans doesn't show my face. Just kidding.
Except on 50, except on 9th Avenue and 50th Street.
That's right, girl. Because Johnny Minogue and I did run into each other on the streets of New York City, and he lives in Boston, and hey kids, that's showbiz. You can find me probably making a snippy comment about something Bravo related or film on Twitter at @ET Kevin's Mind. By the way, this is, we are recording this the week of the Tom Sandoval Raquel drama. Girl, bravo.
Scandalous.
But more seriously, I went to an all-boys military high school, so I did not come out until college. I was an RA, and there was a girl who was an RA with me, and she's like, "You're gay, right? Can I just tell it? Can we just get that out of the way so we can be like really good friends?" And we're not. She was my best friend in college, and carried me through in many ways. And so I think she gave me the bravery more than anything, because she knew I did not. And I think, it wasn't a situation where some folks would be like, "Oh, she outed you." No, she just gave me the tools to actually name it for myself, because she knew I wasn't confident in myself in that time. And I think that story means a lot to me in thinking back on it. So thanks, Lauren, if you ever listen.
She recognized you.
Yeah, she saw me.
Yeah.
She saw me.
Yeah.
That's such a lovely way to put it, Carissa.
Some of my friends said to me, "Nobody straight has this many queer friends." And I was like, "Oh, you're right."
I can't wait to tell all the straight men I'm friends with that.
Kevin, did you share your socials? I don't think you did.
Oh, ET Kevin's Mind on Twitter and Instagram. I'm going to leave that one alone. Seek me out, boys.
Come and find me.
Come and get me, boys.
That's right. You can find me at Eric Resniak on Twitter and Instagram. That's ERICREZ as in zebra, S as in snake, N as in Nancy, YAK. But really, you should be following at Great Pop Culture Debate on Insta or at GPCD on Mastodon. When did I come out? It's a tricky question. I mean, I would say, and I literally have said, like, anyone with a head knew what was going on, like, from birth, right? Like, there was no hiding it. Like, as I look back at photos from childhood, I was just like, never stood a chance. But then, like, the story I will share, and I don't know if my brother would want me sharing this, but I'm sharing it, is I was probably like 21, 22. I was out in the gay bars of Syracuse. I was at Charades, which was the drag bar at the time, where Miss Frida Lay was the MC, terrific MC. And they were doing Queer Factor. This is early 2000s, where they would do Fear Factor and like have like people shave their heads on stage or like drink a Spam milkshake. And I had a nickname in the gay bars of Syracuse. I did not know this at the time, of the mean guy, because I have terrible resting bitch face, and everyone thought that I was this very angry person. So no one would ever approach me. And I get a tap on my shoulder. I was like, what is happening? And I turn around and it's my little brother. And I was like, what the fuck? And then the moment of dawning realization, oh shit, my brother's also gay. And it was like a simultaneously 3, 2, 1. Does mom know? And that was the beginning of that story. And yeah, but I don't really have like a day that I celebrated for it, because I would say I came out at birth, because there was no disguising it. It is what it is.
Did you tell Aggie Doon the story?
I didn't tell Aggie that story, actually. Maybe I should. But all that being said, let's move on to round 3 so we can make a move on to the lab and see what's on the slab. It is our lead 8. We're going to start out with Hedwig and the Angry Inch versus Milk. I'm going to go around the horn. I'm going to start with Johnny. Where do you come down on this one?
My name is Johnny Minogue, and I'm here to recruit you. I'm going with Milk.
Oh, okay. Carissa, where are you?
I'm with Hedwig and the 1,000 Fantastic Wigs.
And Kevin, where are you?
I just want to compliment you for your RuPaul pronunciation of milk.
Milk. Yeah.
I am also with Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I know we haven't talked about it yet, so if I may indulge me, I think Hedwig and the Angry Inch came out in 2001 from John Cameron Mitchell. 2001 is one of those, it is, in my opinion, the rebirth of the movie musical. You have Hedwig and Moulin Rouge coming out this year, and both represent the power of, I think, what is the modern movie musical. The rock underscore, the kind of like bravada that embraces the reputation of musicals past, like the bigness. They are big movies. Even though Hedwig has a very small kind of structure, it just rings so big because John Cameron Mitchell as Hedwig in this rock persona, who is just this like rock goddess, is preeminent queer cinema. It was probably one of the most profound, that and Moulin Rouge were profound in me kind of falling in love with musicals. And I think Hedwig's queerness cuts deep and really was, again, one of those early 2000s films that allowed queer indie cinema to be what it is today.
Yeah, so this is in no way a vote against Harvey Milk, who is a legend and icon. I mean that in every sense of the word. But if I'm looking at these two films, Milk is a biopic. It's a very good, solid film. But where I give the tip to Hedwig is the audacity of this film. Like, I rewatched it for this, and I'd seen it multiple times over the past intervening 23 years. Is it something like 23 years? Shoot me. Oh, I shouldn't say that in the same phrase with Harvey Milk. That's in bad taste. But
it's only 20. It's only 22. It's
22. Okay, well that's fine. That's that's sophisticated. But what I was going to say is, it stands up. It is a great film. It's a beautiful film, first of all. Like, it moves very quickly. It is a very imaginative film. The animated segments in there, the more kind of high art, hyper stylized, almost, what's the word that I'm looking for here? When it's not reality, it's like hyper reality moments. Mm-hmm. There's the segment where they're doing a show and they're in a trailer and suddenly the trailer turns into a stage. It's just everything about it. The incredible diner sequence that they're in. Like, it's a really well-made film, and it's shocking when you realize this is the first film for Cameron as director, correct?
I believe so. No, wait.
Was it?
Someone fact check me on that.
We're
Regardless,
fact checking.
it's an
We
incredibly
did Short Bus after this, which
That was in
actually,
2006. This was in 2001. That was in 2006. So yeah, it was afterwards.
Yes, this was his directorial debut.
It's so assured. It is so confident, and it is a wild story. And the music's beautiful. The last act is a mess. It's a mess. I have no idea what's happening in the last act, but I don't care because it's still beautiful. And that is why I ultimately give it the tip over Milk here. Milk's a very good biopic, but this is something extraordinary. It is kind of what being gay is to me, which is something extra that brings a light into the world. That's, again, very high-minded and highfalutin, but that's how I feel about it. So that's 3 for Hedwig, 1 for Milk. Johnny, can you continue on with us with Milk?
I'll forget it as fast as Dianne Feinstein does, so it's fine.
Oh, God. The savaging of Dianne Feinstein in this episode.
I
My
am
God.
here for it. Thank you, Johnny.
All right.
You're welcome,
right.
baby. Yeah, no, it's like moving along. It's good. It's good. All I want is like I want people who don't know Harvey Milk to learn about Harvey Milk.
Absolutely.
So
Yes, absolutely. Next, it's Brokeback Mountain versus The Birdcage. I'm going to start reverse order with Kevin. Where are you on this one?
For me, it's The Birdcage.
Okay. Carissa.
I think I'm going to go with The Birdcage. I don't have anything super resonant with either of these films. I think they're both great. I've seen them both a handful of times. But I think The Birdcage, I don't know, something about the recent rewatching of both of them, it touched a part of my heart that Brokeback did not.
Johnny.
I'm going with Birdcage because I love The Birdcage so much, and I'm also voting against the Brokeback because it took out Priscilla, so 2 times I'm going for
We
Birdcage.
love a spite vote.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me.
straight people who are listening to this podcast, I think it's important for you to understand pettiness is part of gay culture. And so
Sure is.
we
When we get
embrace
to
that.
Paris and
if you
Berlin,
will.
we're talking about that.
We will talk about that. Correct. I'm going to make it a clean sweep. There's, I think we spoke fairly eloquently about what made Brokeback so important in the last round. But one of the factors that I think Carissa talked about was gay joy versus gay trauma. And if I had to choose one of these, which one are you going to rewatch? There's no question which one of these I'm going to rewatch. Does that make it a better movie? I don't know. And I don't want queer cinema to just to be synonymous with torment, right? That's depressing and that's not who we are. We honor that, but we have to move forward. So we will have unanimous victory for the Birdcage here. Next up, it's Rocky Horror Picture Show versus Moonlight. Going to start smack in the middle with Carissa. Where are you?
I am a Rocky Horror Picture Show stan. Fun fact, the first time I saw Rocky Horror was on Valentine's Day in the mid-90s. I was 15. It was at the local college, and it had a shadow cast and props. I was a virgin in all of the senses. I showed up in baggy jeans, a t-shirt, and a flannel, as you did in the mid-90s. Thank God I was not hazed, because my friend and I were the only ones not in black or corsets. And I did not know what I was in for at all. I was completely gobsmacked by that experience. Like, obviously, it's been formative. My bicycle is named Janet. I love this film with my whole heart, and I can say more about it if I have to. But I really think Rocky Horror existed so Hedwig could exist. Like, it is queer rock opera cinema. I've seen the stage play. I've seen it several times, like the film version with Shadowcast, and they're still doing it. Like, I went to a drag show a couple of weeks ago with 20 something kids, and they were like, "Who were you when we did Rocky?" Like, they're still doing it. And this film is almost 50 years old. It came out in 1975. So, it's here to stay, and I'm here to support it.
Kevin, where are you?
I'm with Moonlight. Rocky Horror, I get it. I get why people love it. It is not, even though I just spoke for Hedwig, I think Hedwig is a better made film. And I think that's where I also come down. I think these are both good. I think these both are excellent representations of queerness in different segments of what they do. But I think Rocky Horror is just not a well-made film in my take. That's my delineation here. And for me, I prefer Moonlight either way. I've seen Moonlight more than I've seen Rocky Horror, to be honest.
I would certainly say that Hedwig is far more accessible than Rocky Horror, for sure.
I disagree.
Really?
But that's another conversation.
That's okay. We can have that conversation. But Johnny, where are you on this one?
It's astounding. Time is fleeting. Madness.
So Moonlight for you.
I was like, wait, I thought I was talking about Priscilla again. No.
That's a vote for Rocky Horror. I'm going for Rocky Horror here. I am chagrined that we are losing Moonlight before Final Four. I am chagrined at that, Kevin. Just putting that on the record.
Listen, I get it.
But I mean, even if I voted for Moonlight, it wouldn't matter. Rocky Horror is a 1. And I do think that it does one of Carissa's points that we cannot lose sight of here. I think Rocky Horror is the oldest film on this list. It may have been the oldest film in the top 32. And besides a handful of other ones on that whole poll, Rocky Horror is almost 50 years old. The primacy argument cannot be denied here. And regardless of your thoughts about the film overall, the fact that this was not only made and released in the 1970s, but became the cultural juggernaut that it did is truly, to borrow a term that Johnny just used, astounding. Really, that is and it's queer in the broadest sense, right? It's not explicitly gay, although there's definitely explicit gay moments in it, but it is talking about, you want gender as a spectrum. Gender is an electromagnetic spectrum in this movie, right? It is all over the place.
And it made so many careers. And it made so many careers.
And there are so many, I feel like what this film has is there are so many entry points. There's the Brad and Janet. We are straight. We just got engaged couple who have sex in the film, just not with each other. Like they both have sex with Frankenfurter. Janet has a moment with Rocky. Like there's so much here, and their transformation from their straight-laced outfits into the final number with corsets and fishnets. Like, can we just...
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that more in the next round because I agree with you. I do just need to piggyback. You said there's so many openings here, and any hole is a goal.
Entry points.
Entry points. And I think Dr. Frankenfurter would really appreciate that. So we will advance Rocky Horror. Next up, it is But I'm a Cheerleader versus Paris is Burning. I'm going to start with Gianni Minogue.
Oh, it's like... reading come from shading. Shading came first. So I am going with... So we haven't talked about Paris is Burning. We will talk about Paris is Burning, but if I'm going to do both of these movies, if you're talking about the best queer movie, it's Paris is Burning.
Carissa.
As much as I love But I'm a Cheerleader, Paris is Burning is canon. And it's also the only documentary that we have on this. Yep. And we don't get so many things without this film. And this film is just iconic on all the levels. I am 100% Paris is Burning here.
Kevin.
Well, Eric, I always had hopes of being a big star, but as you get older, you aim a little lower. And boy, am I aiming low. I feel like we should talk about Paris is Burning here so we can go into the final four with like a recognition of what this film is.
Yep.
It's the intersectionality of Black queer excellence that started the movement of the gay rights movement way back when, and put on film in 1990. And it's where, whether you know it or not, old gays, young old queer folks, young queer folks, this is where a lot of our vernacular comes from. This is where the library is open. Reading is fundamental. This is what...
Beat your face.
Beat your face. This is what created the benchmark for queer cinema. Like, plain and simple.
I'm not even cinema, just culture.
Queer culture.
RuPaul came from this. RuPaul has everything you know from Drag Race came from Paris is Burning.
But it's not even some of the things. It's like some of the terms that we talk about in Paris is Burning is actually entered the just general pop culture zeitgeist.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. I use the term Rosetta Stone for many different things, but this isn't even the Rosetta Stone. This is the Tower of Babel for gay culture, right? Mm-hmm. This is all the languages coming together, all the cultures coming together and coalescing. Now, I do think we need to be very explicit about the fact that that is built on a foundation of POC gay people.
Yes. Right.
And it has been co-opted by white people, gay, straight, whatever. And that was one of the main criticisms of this documentary when it came out, was a white straight woman. I believe she was a white straight woman.
She's a white straight woman.
Yes, took these queer POC stories and
trans. So many of these stories are trans. So many
trans, absolutely, and put them out into the public. But it was through that lens of a white straight woman, right? And people were like, "Are you?" Much like they criticized Madonna with Vogue, like, "Are you taking this culture and using it for your own personal gain? Are they benefiting from it?" That is a very real criticism of this movie that we can't leave out, but. Putting that aside, it really, I mean, they literally teach this in college courses. They were teaching this in college courses when I was in college in the late 90s. Like, it became instantly like, this is a cultural text that if you need to understand the gay community, regardless of your gender expression, regardless of your skin color, you need to watch this film. So it is, to me, we use the term seminal a lot, and in a queer film, seminal can mean many different things.
It's just how you spell it. It's only how you spell it. That's the only difference.
Exactly. But like, for me, it does not get much more definitive about gay cinema than this film. So correct. I believe we have a clean sweep for Paris is Burning. Yep.
Yes.
All right, so that is it. We have our final four. We're going to take a quick break to explore the origin of love. We'll be right back after these messages. And we are back with the final four of our best queer film debate. At this point in the show, I always like to take a step back and see if we got to where I think we were going to. We have Hedwig and the Angry Inch versus The Birdcage. That's a 1 seed versus a 2 seed. Rocky Horror Picture Show versus Paris is Burning, a 1 seed versus a 1 seed, I believe. Correct?
2 seed for Paris.
Paris is a 2. Okay. So I have to say, I think we're pretty much the only other exceptions, Moonlight and Brokeback Mountain, I could have seen in this final four as making sense from we don't have an Oscar winner for drama in here.
Yeah.
Not me. Not
you.
We got it, girl, to quote Chad Michaels.
But I gotta say, it's a great top four. It's a really good final four. I feel great about it. I think this is going to get really nasty. I think there's a clear winner in either of these matches. With that being said, we're going to start Hedwig versus The Birdcage. I'm going to start with Kevin. Where are you?
Birdcage. I think it's the better film. Mike Nichols, Elaine May, sharp. The second highest grossing gay film of all time. Unfortunately, the first is Bohemian Rhapsody, which thankfully did not make this bracket. Let's not talk
about that. Yeah.
But made over $100 million in 1996, which for inflation, folks, that's a shit ton of money in 1996 for a movie about two gay men who who own a drag club, and is peak excellence for queer cinema. It is a quote machine for gays, straights, everybody. It's in drag numbers, etc. And so is Hedwig in some ways, but just to a lesser extent.
All right. Great arguments. Johnny, where are you on this?
I'm going to go with The Birdcage only slightly. I think that Hedwig is a amazing movie and has it's actually I think a better stage show. It is actually a better stage show.
Yes.
And when it came onto the film, there were things that were lost, unfortunately, that you couldn't replicate on film. So I think if you want to go see a show, go see Hedwig wherever you are. If they are on a road show, go see them. If you go to New York, whoever is doing Hedwig, just see it. I'm going to go with The Birdcage.
Okay. Yeah. Carissa.
You don't put a bra into the dryer, Eric. It warps. I'm with Hedwig. There's just something about it that I find really accessible. The shadow tour of the pop star who stole all of the songs. And also, if we want to talk about cultural relevance, season 43 Survivor, Carla had the tattoo of the... Niche. Yeah, it is, but it's so queer and it's so incredibly identifiable. And I feel like it is the love child of Rocky Horror. I mean, it is a rock opera, but the songs are catchy. It's fun. It's also hard in some parts, but the wigs, and there's the Rent storyline of one of Hedwig's band members trying out and then getting a role as Angel in Rent. Like, we haven't even talked about Rent because the film version is terrible. But it's part of the culture. It's part of the canon, and it shows up as a side story in this. And I just think, educating a young, impressionable man who then steals all of your genius and becomes really famous is like a storyline, right? and then following him to play at Red Lobsters in the same cities is so petty and is so iconic. And also just like the shots of the hotel rooms with like the 50 blonde wigs and then the 5 people with their foam wigs who follow the band. Like, there's so much here to love. And as much as I did not like the other John Cameron Mitchell film that was on the bracket, Short Bus, I am 100% in for Hedwig and her Angry Inch.
I'll say, like, speaking of Rent the movie, Anthony Rapp is better in Adventures in Babysitting than he was in Rent.
I mean, most yeah.
Oh,
that movie's iconic.
If
obviously we got the babysitting blues,
right? Nobody leaves this place.
It is. All right. So we knew this day was coming where I was going to have to bring this up. And Kevin, I love you. I'm going to say that again because I think it's important to create a space of love. one of my issues with the Birdcage that I struggle with, and I refer to this in part one, is I feel like it's a Disney-fied version of gayness that was deliberately meant to be palatable to a straight audience. And that's not a bad thing, because in that time, we needed that. We needed allies. We needed to have people see, oh, gays, they're just like us, but with better taste. And I think the
what's
Birdcage,
wrong with that?
there's nothing wrong with that. And the Birdcage is everything you said. There is, it's incredibly sharp. It is funny. It's great performances from like everybody in that cast virtually. It's terrific. I said as part of my rubric, I give extra points for queer stories that are being told by queer artists, and Hedwig is a queer story told by a queer artist.
Just as a piece, Mike Nichols was, in some vein or form, very well connected to the queer community and telling their stories. Now, maybe he didn't self-identify as gays, but there were many intimations of his being connected and potentially part of the queer community. So
just check Giant Sawyer's closet. I'm sure there's something in there.
Just saying.
Check. No, go ahead.
No, it's part of his biography. I'm listening to it. It's not necessarily overtly said that he was, but he was noted to have a relationship with a man in his
I was going to say, just don't check Dorian Corey's closet. Anyway, but
we'll get into the next bracket.
We will.
Can I ask a fact-finding question around what you mean? So, when you say Disney-fied, you're using a modern term of Disney and what Disney means. And Disney-fied in 1996, when The Birdcage came out, is not what language could exist or what exists around this. You're taking a modern term where you're kind of saying the sunshine and rainbows. But in 1996, that was a cutting edge film. So for you to say that it was Disney-fied at the time, you're not necessarily correct, because in its own way, it was a radical interpretation of queerness in 1996. And I think we as a podcast sometimes put modern stipulations on previous things. And as a listener, when I hear you all do that, I sometimes get frustrated because context does matter.
Okay, I'm going to own everything you just said, and I'm not going to debate it at all. I think that's probably very true. I guess it doesn't feel, how do I say this? At the same point, as I'm wrestling this, because Hedwig is a story about a trans character, but it's not being told by a trans author, right? It is a gay man telling a trans person's story. So that's not even really an apples to apples comparison either. I can see either going forward. I don't love The Birdcage as much as you do, Kevin. And I know there are a lot of people who also... It is
the film, when I told people that we were doing this podcast, that everyone was like, oh, well, it's The Birdcage.
But it's the number 2 seed. Hedwig's the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
So your friends
way more people.
Or they're not everyone.
Well, but I know, but so if you're talking about an affinity for queerness and like the larger impact of a queer film, it's more recognizable. And I actually think The Birdcage is a better film and a better stage adaptation, and I think Hedwig is a better stage adaptation than a film. So that's my take.
I'm going to do the most gay thing ever and be Machiavellian, and I'm going to go ahead and throw my vote to The Birdcage because it's going to make my final round easier. So
there you go.
How very Bob of you.
Eric as a person would absolutely watch Hedwig more than The Birdcage, but Eric, as the person who wants to finish this episode of this podcast, is going to give it to The Birdcage, so The Birdcage advances to the final 2. Next, it's Rocky Horror versus Paris is Burning. Carissa, where are you on this one?
This is really hard because, as I said previously, I'm a Rocky Horror stan. I had a Sweet 16 Rocky Horror Picture Show birthday party. People showed up in drag. I wore a corset and heels that I would not put myself in these days. And fishnets. And I think Rocky Horror is iconic on so many levels, and it's so accessible from many angles. Take that as you will. And it's fun, and it's camp, and it's also got the sci-fi love affair part. It's really wonderful, and I love it so much, but I love Paris is Burning more. I think the stories that it tells are more important. And regardless of where they're coming from, I think what the film did was it elevated and it gave a platform to those people. Can we talk about House of Ninja and Willy Ninja? And like when Eric and I went to DragCon New York a couple of years ago, like we bought pins that were like, that said like House of Ninja, La Beija, like all of the houses. And these people are iconic. Dorian Corey is a punchline in some ways because she took care of her John, right? Like, she's iconic, and like her painting her face also with the cat in the background. Like there's so much relatability here. Like you get the ball stuff and then you get the behind the scenes humanity of these people. And like Venus Extravaganza is like a tragedy, like touch the skin, touch all the skin, honey. Like she was amazing. And what happened to her is tragic. And it is also all too common even now. And so for the stories it tells of BIPOC trans people who are queer, there's no way to deny Paris is Burning here.
Johnny.
Opulence. You own everything.
Thank you. That's a vote for Paris is Burning. For those of you who have not watched the show, it is not a reference to Mercedes Iman Diamond.
No, because she earned everything. That's the difference. That's the difference. No, we're talking about Paris is Burning.
Yes. Kevin, where are you?
Paris is Burning, hands down.
Yeah.
Love it.
I think we've talked about Rocky Horror a decent amount, but we have not once mentioned Tim fucking Curry. Listen, Frankenfurter has been played by a million different people at this point, and no one has come close to doing this role justice.
It used to be the Drag Race. Like when you won Drag Race, you went into a tour of Rocky Horror. Like in the early seasons, that was the thing. Like Sharon Needles, Ginger Minge, like who didn't win but still went into a tour. Like it was a thing in the early. Like that was part of the prize. It's such a part of what you do.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of like pop culture that comes from both of these movies. I think that in regards to queer movies, we'd have to put Paris just a smidge over Rocky. But yeah, I mean, it's like there would be no Susan Sarandon would not have a career if she didn't have Rocky.
Amazing.
As much as she talked shit about it for 20 something years, she finally came around.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Susan Sarandon makes a lot of dumb comments. I'm just going to say that.
She's on a wavelength. She's on a wavelength.
She needs to collect herself to take some terminology from Paris is Burning.
Let's go with Barry Bostwick, though. Never had a problem with the movie.
No. But no, we haven't really talked about those performances. They're indelible. They're incredible. It is, the oldest movie on this list, but Paris is Burning is not that much longer after it. And it is a more authentic picture of queer life and a queer community that was largely invisible to almost all of America until this film came. And I think that's so important. So we are going to advance Paris is Burning with the final two of The Birdcage versus Paris is Burning. Carissa, where are you voting?
Paris is Burning. I think all the things we just said about it, it's so important. And it's, as you said, it's the Rosetta, like not even a prototype. Like it's the Rosetta Stone. We wouldn't have so many of the things we have in love. I mean, Pose, all of it. Yeah, all of it.
Johnny.
It's 100% Paris is Burning. There's so many things that we as queer people we don't even think about. It comes from this movie 100%. And there really isn't at this point any other movie that would kind of supplant that. So Paris is Burning is the ultimate queer movie.
Kevin.
I'm going to use a quote from the film I'm not picking. Someone's got to like me best before I choose Paris is Burning because it absolutely is. We haven't talked about Nathan Lane that much, and I do want to give him a huge shout out for The Birdcage. He was a SAG Award nominee. He was a Golden Globe nominee for this film in the early years of the SAG Awards. The Birdcage won the SAG Ensemble Award, and I can't find that clip online, and it really makes me sad because it was just a great ensemble and really led by Nathan Lane and Robin Williams, but Nathan Lane in particular being brave and basically coming out with this performance. And he's just so heartbreaking and funny and beautiful, and just, I think it's one of my favorite performances from an actor of the 90s. I just love it. But Paris is Burning is our blueprint for culture. It defines a lot of who the queer community is. And if you haven't seen this documentary, it's available on Criterion. It's easily accessible. It's a film that, is there and out there, and you absolutely should seek it out. And we talk about a lot of stuff, and it's a part of our history, and it's important for us to lean into that. And it's fantastic. So Paris is Burning.
The Criterion reissue is really beautiful too. They cleaned up the footage. It's really clean. It's worth seeking out.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm going to make it a clean sweep. I just don't know how you can have a best queer film episode and frankly have any other outcome. It is just absolutely quintessential. It is legendary, like the gals and the balls themselves. Absolutely legendary. And there you have it. Our pick for the best queer film is Paris is Burning. Do you agree? Do you think we addled our brains doing the time warp? Tell us how you really feel by leaving a comment on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com, or find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Mastodon. While you're there, make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you can hear about what debates are coming soon, vote in open polls, and even decide which topics we tackle next. If you really enjoyed this episode, please take a minute and to like and rate the episode of the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or whatever platform you listen. I want to say thank you to my panel. I would never wish to quit you. And thank you for listening. If you loved what you heard, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get even more exclusive content and you get episodes a whole day early. We hope you had a good one. And remember, everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion. It buttons on the left.